a message to the people at that time, even though the people at this time can't possibly understand them without a lot of historical background. That is Cornelia de Sicarius, a beneficia. Latin. This is the Cornelian legislation concerning the Sicari and bodily mutilation. It's a traditional body of Roman jurisprudence, all attributed to Publius Cornelius Scipion. Now, I don't know if you ever heard of Publius Cornelius Scipion. How many have heard of Publius Cornelius Scipion? The conqueror of Carthage, where Hannibal came from, the destroyer of Carthage, very successful Roman general of the 2nd century BC, 2nd to 1st century BC, and highly regarded. This legislation was all placed in his name. There's the Cornelian part of it. And later on, this is the legislation that we find, Oregon tells us that you never find a Sicarius in our day who is not executed. Oregon is writing in the 200s, 3rd century, and he says it in one, I give the quotes in my book. And he means by a Sicarius someone who has either mutilated himself or mutilated others by way of castration or circumcision. So he lets it, and then, by the way, Oregon does this to himself, apparently. Because later on, I think it's either Jerome or Eusebius, I forget who is in my book, I think it's Jerome who laughs at Oregon too. Jerome laughs at everybody. I told you he wasn't very receptive to Augustine's note to him. He laughs at Oregon. He doesn't like the fellow who originally published the Pseudo-Clementines, Rufinus, who had been his friend back in Italy when they were young. And when he dies, he said, finally this snake in the grass is dead, serves him right, or something like that. A lot of charity there, by the way. Good Christian charity. These are, I'm not being facetious. I mean, you are supposed to exemplify the ideals that you promote. How can you say this about somebody? Just because you have a grudge against them, you're supposed to love your enemies, aren't you? Anyway, what I'm just trying to say, these are the churchmen that we're dealing with. So I'm not against these ideals. I'm just saying how hard they are. Even the proponents of them are not able to embody them in their worst moments. In any case, Rufinus he abominates, and Oregon he's just laughing at. He did this, he says, out of zeal. I forget how he says it, out of zeal, but not out of intelligence. And it was because at one point he said, you should make yourself eunuchs for the kingdom of heaven. Jesus says at one point in one of the sayings here, he says that Oregon did this. He says. In any event, it's outside of our thing, but I think that that was being, used to suppress the Sicari. And the Sicari, were the extreme zealots in Palestine. I don't think they ended there, because Josephus traces the Sicari down to Egypt after the war and into Libya. And he says that the disturbances continued down there after 70 AD. And then the Romans, as I say in my book, imposed a thing called the Sicaricon, which was obviously aimed at what they considered to be Sicari who were revolutionaries. It was what we would call a confiscation of enemy property law, applied in Palestine. It's in the Talmud, you can find it. They knew about the Sicaricon. Anyone who had participated in revolt against Romans, their property and all their other peoples connected to them, their property was confiscated by the Roman authorities. And this was also related to Sicari. And then finally, Hippolytus, who I've told you about, I know there's a lot of information to handle. I thought that's too much for me to handle, frankly. That's why I go running all over the place. I don't know where to stop, because there's no straight line through this material. Hippolytus is the person I told you who tells us about Sicarii Essenes and Zealot Essenes. It's somewhat different from the normal Josephus, but it's clearly a version of Josephus that he's got his hands on. Anyway, he says there are a group, Sicarii Essenes, which means that there are, terrorist Essenes, extremist Essenes. And these people will kill anybody they hear discussing the law, as I told you, who does not agree first to be circumcised. That is, you first, it's not because they want to mutilate you or something. It's that they feel that according to the law, the sign of the law is, the sign of the covenant is circumcision. If you want to discuss the law, you must first be part of the law. You must first come in under the law. That gives you the right to discuss it. You cannot discuss the law from outside the law, as Paul and others are doing. And as far as they're concerned. And so maybe not. And you notice Paul does that too, according to Acts. He said, and I circumcised, was it Timothy or Titus, so that he could travel with me. At one point he says in Acts, I think it's, it's right after the Jerusalem Council when Barnabas and the others refused, when Barnabas and John Mark, whoever he is, stopped traveling with Paul. Split away, and Paul says that he won't travel with them either, and he heaps aspersions on John Mark and says, oh, John Mark is the man that deserted our activities in Pamphylia. Again, I don't mean to brag or pull rank on you, but I think I know the New Testament as well as most of you guys. Chapter 16. A certain disciple named Timothy, the son of a certain woman, that certain is always interesting, who was a believing Jewess, but father was a Greek. I don't think Timothy is to be distinguished to any extent to Titus, from Titus, even though occasionally they appear together in Paul's letters. And only once, I think, in Peter they appear together, but always they're separate. I think that Titus is the Roman name, Timothy is the Greek name. So a lot of these people double because they have different names from different languages, like Paul and Saul. And another one like that is Silas and Silvanus. I think if my Latin doesn't escape me, I think Silvanus would be the Latin and Silas would be the Greek. These are not two different people. And so on and so forth. Cephas and Peter, Aramaic and Greek. Anyway, so a certain disciple named Timothy, 16:1 Acts, whose father was Greek, was recommended to me by